Well, thanks for coming today. My name is Pete Kiefer. I am the Civil Court Administrator at the Maricopa Superior Court, and I'm going to spend the next few minutes chatting with you about some of the work that a co-worker of mine, Phil Knox, and I have been doing on the future of the courts. We started this about 2012, and we're still in an ongoing project to look at the future of the courts. Before I start, I want to tell you, number one, that I like interactive programs, so do not hesitate to raise your hand, make comments, ask questions. And secondly, I am not here to represent myself as a guru of the future. Actually, what I'm going to see my job here today is to reflect back to you what a lot of your fellow court professionals around the country and around the world have said about what they think the future of the courts might hold. We started by building on work that Brenda Wagenknecht-Ivy, if any of you know her, and John Martin started several years back on looking at various directions for the future of the courts. But what we have intended to do was to create a series of very realistic scenarios that might occur within the courts within the next, say, 10 or 15 years, and then ask people to assess the probability of each one of those scenarios occurring. So we did this to engage those who know the court best, and so we chose not to take a very small group of, say, court experts, because we were trying to avoid groupthink or folks who all thought the same way about where they thought the direction of the court was. So we have a very large and very diverse group of individuals from around the country and frankly around the world who have taken our surveys and assessed the probability of these scenarios. And I'll take this opportunity that on the table someplace are sign-up sheets. We are in the midst of our third survey. If at the end of this program you would be interested in taking our survey, please sign your name and your email, and I will send you out the link for our third survey, and we would love to have you take it. One of the purposes that we started this is that we wanted this to be an actual environmental scanning tool for use in strategic plans. I will confess to you here, because I do not believe any of you know that much about the Maricopa Superior Court, that from time to time I've had to update the court's strategic plan, the criminal department's strategic plan. When I worked for the Oregon court system, I had to work on developing their strategic plan. Sometimes you would take a look of your filings and dispositions. I'd pull out a ruler from my desk. I would put the ruler down on that graph, and I would take a line and I would go move that line out about 5 years and say, there's the future. Pretty much the same as we have for the last 5 years, maybe a slight increase. What we're trying to do here is to show a very realistic idea of what the courts might be like 10 to 15 years out, using court professionals like yourselves, and doing something beyond just simply straight lining your filings and dispositions, which I'm sure none of you ever actually did to develop your strategic plans. So we currently have right now over 560 people from around the country and around the world. Most of them are from the US, though we do have people from a number of other countries, including Canada and Australia. The survey presents... No, I can do that, I'm fine. Okay. The survey right now consists of 91 different scenarios, and what we asked, as I said, we asked people to assess the probability of each one of these scenarios. The survey has just a subgroup of the 91 scenarios in terms of their likelihood of happening by the year 2025. So it ranges from 1, highly likely, January 1st, 2025, sun will come up in the east, down to 5, improbable, meaning space aliens will take over our minds and we'll all be happy. And then so that they send in their assessments, and we average them out, and then we group them by their average likelihood. So when we start talking about some of these scenarios in just a minute or so, I want to point out to you that obviously the lower the average, the more probable it is. So try and keep that in mind. I have had people say that it should have been reversed, that if any of you remember the movie, one fellow said Bo Derek was a 10, not a 1, but here 1 is the most likely. So I'll do this by asking about some generalized questions of the courts about the future, and then discussing some of the trends and counter trends that occur with these questions, and then showing you the scenario or scenarios that we had to address some of these questions and the assessed likelihood that they would occur. So the first question is, what will court files look like? Will all court files within the next 10 or 15 years be electronic? Will they be document imaging? Our scenario that we posited to folks was that all courts will be paperless, that more and more courts will convert to document imaging. And the result was 186 respondents, highly likely, 1.7 probability that throughout the nation and possibly in a number of other countries that it's going to be highly likely that most courts will be paperless by 2025. Certainly the efficiencies of no more lost court files, savings in file rooms, makes this a very attractive scenario to occur. In fact, I think Daniel Kruger was talking about significant savings in his clerk's office. It was in Ottawa County. The question that I would have for you is that, to me, it seems like this innovation, which certainly has been around now for a number of years, isn't moving with lightning speed. Or maybe it is, and I'm just not picking it up. So my question is, why isn't it moving as faster than it seems to be, that more courts are adopting the paperless court system? First of all, let me ask you, how many of you think that this innovation, this scenario, is moving pretty slowly? How will the public view the courts? This is sort of a broader one. Public satisfaction with government at all levels seems to be at an all-time low point. I have to say, as a member, court professional, member of the judicial branch, I'm glad the public doesn't think of us as low as Congress. But we certainly we still have our problems. I mean, I've gotten a lot of negative comments from folks who are upset at activist judges, which, you know, when I'm looking at my backyard barbecue, I'm not sure if anybody has a clear definition of what a activist judge is, but they're upset with activist judges. There are also a number of folks who think that courts have become too much of a social service agency, social work agency. There are also, in fact, I perceive that there have been efforts, I don't know if there have been any efforts here in Michigan, sort of eating around the edges of what has traditionally been the judicial purview. In a number of jurisdictions around the country, traffic on the municipal court level or the justice court level, parking. In many places, that function in some cities has been moved to, say, the Department of Finance, maybe on a state level. Some low-level traffic then is moved to the Motor Vehicles Division, and they will handle what initially would be non-contested cases and keeping it outside of the court purview altogether. Any in Michigan, do you guys know of that or at all, or is this just something more of a California and Arizona issue? of parking, traffic, low-level traffic cases going to executive agencies like the Department of Finance or Motor Vehicles? No? They do? What do they do?
I think they write parking tickets and have them payable at the township office.
Township office, and then if there's a contested, what they usually do is they have a contest, if somebody contests it, then they'll transfer it to the municipal court, or I don't know, is it the municipal court or the district court? Yeah, okay, so they are able to handle that. You know, I've had judges also talk to me that non-contested divorces could be removed and put under the executive. I had one judge who even said that there were some juvenile matters that he thought could probably be converted over, which I thought was stunning for a judicial officer to make that recommendation. So it is interesting that, you know, I think we have a significant issue. I personally think there's a significant issue on the public's view of the courts. Now, we have two scenarios that we ran. The first one is that we proposed that the gap between society's expectations of courts and our ability to meet those expectations, the court's ability to meet them, is going to widen by the year 2025. It's going to get wider and wider. The people are going to expect more, and we are not going to be able to satisfy those expectations. 185 respondents said that was likely. Mean expectation probability of 2.1. Interestingly enough, when we looked at limited jurisdiction courts, municipal and justice courts, they said that that probability was highly likely. But for our current scenario, we asked, by the year 2025, would the judicial branch conduct a sophisticated outreach program to be able to counter some of this negativity? Interestingly enough, what did we have? 340 respondents said, not really, 50-50 chance. I thought this was very interesting in terms that we acknowledge, the respondents acknowledge that this is a problem and it may be a growing problem 5 to 10 or 10 to 15 years out. Now, this may not be the solution, and when we put this scenario in, what we were thinking is court administrators, usually the ones that I have spoken with, seem to be most comfortable speaking to small groups, relatively small groups, civic organizations, college classes, things like that. That seems to be the forte for us as court administrators. We have to acknowledge that whether by design or probably just by happenstance, if you look at the example of law enforcement, they enjoy a very, very sophisticated and positive public image. You've got television shows like NCIS and CSI and Blue Bloods. There's a host of law enforcement television programs out there, and certainly you can't deny that the public views law enforcement in a very, very favorable light. Maybe that's also why when last time I had a meeting in which Sheriff Joe Arpaio was present, our sheriff, he walked in and he said, well, this is all fine, but they're all guilty once I arrest them. And he's able to get away with it. So, I don't know. I mean, let me ask you a question. How many of you think that this is a significant and potentially growing issue? And is there another solution to how to deal with it? How many think this is a significant issue, agree with the fact that the gap is going to widen? How will courts make the record? Electronic recording becomes, our scenario was that electronic recording becomes the official record for court proceedings. 210 respondents said highly likely, so that in the next 10 to 15 years, courts around the country would be making a major move toward electronic recording. Maybe not the most popular scenario for court reporters in this country. Question 9 was, what will court hearings look like in the future? This was one that really befuddled me. Is our scenario is most court hearings will be conducted remotely, most non-dispositive court hearings, status conferences, updates, and that it's going to be less likely that parties will be physically present in the courtroom, except unless it was a trial or another dispositive hearing. We had 346 respondents said, probably not likely, 50-50 chance. So it seems like most respondents still see this as coming physically to the courthouse to get your business done, or at least that they don't see that remote hearings are going to become all that more prevalent. Question 10 is, what will the court's workforce look like? The scenario is that courts will employ significantly more knowledge workers in the years to come. As the case flow management and court management becomes more and more complex, we're hiring folks that, I'm sort of old, folks that we did not hire when I first started in this business, counselors, interpreters, court interpreters, computer experts, security experts, mediators, conciliators, court investigators, webmasters, statisticians, media experts. So the scenario was that more and more of these knowledge workers, people who are going to have significant amounts of knowledge outside of the court system, are going to become very common within the courts. We had 225 respondents said likely, 2.3. In fact, interestingly enough, when we drilled down on this thing, general and limited jurisdiction courts said that it was likely. AOC's state offices around the country said highly likely at 1.9. So I thought that was pretty interesting. So just to wrap up, let me suggest one thing is that you've got the availability of the handout. I don't know if they all have that handout. It's pretty thick, but it has the list of all the scenarios, and I believe they're ranked by their probability. At least you have access to it, I understand, I hope. And when you go back to your courts, probably if you're going to update the strategic plan, as I have to, you're going to look at the most probable scenarios. I would beseech you, don't rule out the ones with lower probability, with the 50-50 chance. Maybe you don't want to put it in the strategic plan as this is what's going to happen in 10 years, but take a look at them, because I do think that these are the ones that are more likely. They are potentially the bolts from the blue. These might be the ones that we're going to be talking about in a conference 10 years from now, that I think that even though their probability is lower, they have a chance. Just another observation is that, as we can see here, one, as William Gibson once said, is the future's already here. It's just not very evenly distributed. Many of you working for courts that look like you're right on the cutting edge, will we have to deal in the years to come about a wide and growing disparity between courts that have a significant amount of innovation and courts that don't? I think that's a real question that we're going to have to be dealing with. And the last request is, if you want to get ahead, you can look back, you can even look ahead, but don't forget to look around. Look at all of these aspects. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.